The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show.
Today is Tuesday, and it's June 29th, 2021. Thanks so much for joining us. We shall overcome. I know we've sung that as a people for seems like generations. And quite frankly, we're tired of having to overcome, which is nothing more than us having to survive. We have had to survive this system at every level, the criminal justice system, the system of Jim Crow, the system of slavery. Every part of our experience in this country has been about survival. We're going to talk about surviving in this country, surviving our voting rights being attacked by the Republican Party, surviving police violence against Black lives. All of that and more coming up. But first, on the clock with Georgia Ford.
Attorney General Merrick Garland announced Friday that the Justice Department is suing the state of Georgia. And it's all a result from, well, you guessed it, voting rights. Okay. After the election, after Biden won, we saw the GOP, we saw Republican senators move very quickly to try to put measures in place to ensure that the amount of Black people we saw turn out for the last election never happens again. Take a listen to Attorney Merrick Garland when he made this announcement on Friday.
In keeping that promise, today the Department of Justice is suing the state of Georgia. Our complaint alleges that recent changes to Georgia's election laws were enacted with the purpose of denying or abridging the right of Black Georgians to vote on account of their race or color in violation of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. Several studies show that Georgia experienced record voter turnout and participation rates in the 2020 election cycle. Approximately 2/3 of eligible voters in the state cast a ballot in the November election, just over the national average. This is cause for celebration. But then in March of 2021, Georgia's legislature passed SB 202. Many of that law's provisions make it harder for people to vote. The complaint alleges that the state enacted those restrictions with the purpose of denying or abridging the right to vote on account of race or color.
Now, some of the things that were prohibited or limited, the use of absentee ballots was limited in these new provisions that came out in March. It also prohibited election officials from soliciting absentee ballots. So just going out and saying, hey, here's an absentee ballot in case you need it. You would no longer be able to do that under the new guidelines that came out in March. And then also it would shorten the period of time in which you could use an absentee ballot. And so all of these different provisions, Ben, they don't surprise us, right? This is not the first time that we saw voting rights restricted. Even thinking back to the literacy tests that were put in place to try to prevent Black people from voting after they were given the right. So this is not a new tactic, but it does feel like it is a direct response to all of these Republicans saying that Biden stole the election. Now you're seeing in March, all of these different provisions put in place. But I will say that I'm impressed that the DOJ is using their power in this capacity.
Yeah, you know, I guess in lieu, okay, I want to speak on this from a positive perspective, because absolutely right. You know, for the DOJ to jump in there at this level to put pressure on these states, starting with Georgia, because Georgia, as you stated, has been under assault by the Republican Party. And this is the thing about it, Georgia, is that, you know, while we have the most attention being put on the very vocal parts of Trumpism, where, you know, where they're acting out and they're showing their bigotry, it is the quiet stuff that the regular old grand old party, the GOP, it's the stuff that they're doing that has the most impactful impact on our rights as African Americans in this country, as Americans in general, because while they're targeting African Americans, there will be other groups that are going to be affected by this. So for the DOJ to jump in this way, it is meaningful, but there is another way, and that was passing the Senate version of HR 1 so that we could protect the For the People Act so that we can actually get it codified into our law.
Absolutely. I want you guys to take a listen to Stacey Abrams. You know, she was very responsible for the huge voter turnout that we saw. If anything, I'd say it's because of her that they went in and changed the laws in March. Take a listen to what she had to say. And this was before the DOJ announced their lawsuit.
Part of the effectiveness of voter suppression is that it doesn't aim at a single target. It tries to dismantle or weaken the entirety of the system. And so, yes, no water because people are going to be standing in line for 7 or 8 hours and might just give up and go home. But if they make it through the gauntlet, they get their ballots cast, they get those ballots counted. On the other side, the Republicans have said to themselves, we may not like the outcome, so we're going to wrest away the power that we have invested in our election workers, people who are putting their time and their talent and their lives on the line sometimes. And we're going to say that they can be overturned by the act of state legislators who don't like the outcome. When you do that, what you are saying is that it's not worth knowing what the outcome will be because they're going to rig the outcome that they want. What they will say in response is, oh, it doesn't say that in the law. But I've been in politics long enough, as have you, to know that what's on the paper can be just the precursor to what happens in reality. And because they are also trying to weaken access to the courts, we don't know the full extent of the power they have given to themselves, but we know enough based on what we see happening in Arizona, what happened in Georgia, what the president of the United States tried to do across this country 70 times. We know that it is not going to be good for America and certainly not going to be good for voters, and it is not good for democracy.
The revolutionary understanding about what is happening comes when you ask yourself why. Why would someone want to attack voting rights? Why would someone want to put measures in place that would make it challenging for you to exercise your constitutional right to vote, right? And it reminds me of John Lewis. And I thought he framed the power of voting beautifully. Because he said it is the most dangerous weapon that's not violent. And so decade after decade, maybe even century after century, we have seen the Black vote attacked. We have seen laws that have been put in place to try to diminish our political power. And it's happening right in front of our faces right now in modern day, 2021. Here we are. Voter suppression is a thing. And it is not only an attack on the potential of Black political power, but it is also an attack on the very bedrock of our nation. It's an attack on our democracy.
Yeah, that's the part, Georgia. That's the part that really bothers me about this. And I think it should alarm everyone. These people, for the sake of power, are willing to destroy America, period. The entirety of the democratic experiment. They're willing to just get rid of it because, well, democracy became inconvenient for them. And the Republican Party, I just want to say this, like the Democrats, I've got plenty of criticisms of the Democrats. You could check the backlog of all the receipts. But the Republicans are really going for an authoritarian state. They are going for keeps. They are not playing games anymore. And so I think we need to see this type of action that we got from Merrick Garland and the Department of Justice. I think we need to see this replicated across the country. If we do not respond in kind to the attack on democracy that we are under, then we're going to find democracy has ended and we'll be looking around wondering what happened.
Yeah. And I was really trying to research, what does this mean? What does it mean when the Department of Justice sues a state, and what can the outcome be? And so I was studying the lawsuit that DOJ brought against Arizona a few years back. And basically, as a result, after that lawsuit went through the Supreme Court, there was a list of basically action items that the state had to take in terms of putting policies in place, putting committees in place, different things like that. So it's not necessarily a lawsuit that you think of, like the state owing the DOJ a bunch of money or someone going to jail, even though that may be a result. But mainly it is to examine processes. And so it's interesting because there were some things that were unraveled in March, and there were some federal limits that were put on the power of each state to go in and make changes on laws surrounding voting. So basically, prior to March, states didn't have the power to make these changes. And then the state of Georgia went in and undid some of that legislation that had been passed back in 2013 that removed the need for federal approval in matters of making changes to voting rights.
Right.
So it was not just, this is not just happen chance. It's not something that they just woke up and did. This has been very, very calculated to go in to examine a law that was passed in 2013 and say, okay, we're going to remove the precursors for us to have to get federal approval to make changes to voting laws. And then we're going to make changes to voting laws that directly impact one specific group in the population. That's very strategic. It's very calculated. And so the DOJ is actually now not only going to try to put those measures back in place, but add some extra measures on top of it.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And you're speaking of Shelby versus Holder, the Supreme Court decision that that gave way to these southern states who had previously demonstrated that they could not be trusted to not suppress the vote of African Americans. Right. They had a history of voter suppression. They had a history of Jim Crow in terms of the poll tax, literacy tests. Like they had a track record of it. And as a result, the Department of Justice or any type of change that these states made on their right to votes or their access to voting, any change had to be pre-approved by the Department of Justice. And with the gutting of Shelby versus Holder, or with Shelby versus Holder gutting the Voting Rights Act, I think it was the Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, by them gutting that allowed now these states to do whatever they wanted to do without prior approval from the Department of Justice. And now, so I guess what this is their way of accommodating for the Department of Justice. Now, instead of being able to check them on the front side, Merrick Garland is saying, let us check it on the back side. And what I'm saying is, let us fix it, period, and get rid of the filibuster and get this thing taken care of. Because if you're not going to protect our fundamental rights in this nation, what's the point?
And it's frustrating because this isn't new. It just continuously evolves. So before it was a literacy test, and now it's putting all of these really weird limitations in place, restrictions in place to make it hard. Why do we want to make it hard for people to vote? Why do we want to make it challenging? If we really believe, if our core collective values as a nation is that voting is our right, and that for a president or any politician to be put into office, that they should be elected by the people, that they should be representatives of the people. Why is it that we don't want fair elections? Why is it that it feels so immature. It feels like one of these politicians, a group of these politicians is just having a tantrum because their candidate didn't win. But see, the reality of it is it's way deeper than that, because they know. They know that it's not just about electing your candidate and them, fulfilling all of the promises that they ran on, during their candidacy. It's deeper than that. You're talking about generations of wealth that is at stake here. You're talking about people's legacies, the things that they want to leave in their states and their cities, with the buildings with their names on it, the promises that they've made to developers, the people who have paid for them to get in, and now they need access to even more political power. And so it becomes more about a personal agenda than it does about the greater common good of America.
I want to go one step further and say yes to everything that you just stated. Absolutely yes. But these people don't even actually care about democracy. I want to make that clear. One of the things that I never forget from my my doctoral program was our national security course. And in that national security course, they outlined, the professor on day one outlined and put them in no particular order, the top four priorities of America. And he, he had us arrange it based on what we thought the priority was. And so a lot of us naively put democracy as number one. And they said, no, based on the analysis of this country, democracy is not number one. It is capitalism is number one. Wealth, greed is number one. This is what now. This was a PhD program in Mississippi. Now I didn't go to one of these liberal arts colleges that people talk about all the time. No, I was in the deep South, and this professor just made it clear. And I think we need to make this clear to everyone. These people do not care about democracy at all. They are more than happy to install a dictator. They are more than happy to see Donald Trump be a dictator over a theocratic, authoritarian state where you have to obey the laws, not of the Missionary Baptist Church, but of the Southern Baptist evangelical churches, right? They would love to have that type of theocracy with Donald Trump as their dictator. So I think we really need to understand that they are playing for keeps. They would just as soon get rid of democracy and use the force of our military and our police state to keep us in check than they would see any decrease in their political or economic power.
And you know what gives me hope? What gives me hope is the fact that I feel like capitalism at its core also requires people in order for it to function. And so what gives me hope is that I feel like America, for the most part, is waking up and starting to see the flaws in the system, starting to see the attack against democracy, and calling out capitalism for what it is. We're seeing for largely the first time ever that there's all of these jobs available and people are just not applying. People don't want to work these jobs no more. You're barely paying people a livable wage, and there's so much pushback, yet and still capitalism will allow a CEO and shareholders and all of these people to make millions while their frontline workers are not even able to pay rent for their family. And so we're seeing that capitalism cannot work without a labor force. And the one of the greatest silver linings of the pandemic was the realization that maybe some of us don't need jobs, that we can stay at home, that we have skills that we can turn into our own businesses. And hey, maybe I might not be, the next Mark Zuckerberg, but I can make enough money to feed my family and have the convenience of being with my family while I do it, instead of having to abide by all of these professional restrictions that are put in place by these corporations that require us to not just work 9 to 5s, but so many people before the pandemic were working 9 to 9s and still not making enough money. And so the thing about the and when you struck a nerve when you started talking about capitalism, because I think now we're at this place where corporations are going to be forced to reckon with their exploitative behavior for centuries, and they're going to have to do better. Otherwise, people are not going back. They gave that cushion by giving people a little extra money on unemployment during the pandemic, and now people are saying, "I'm not going back to that job."
Yeah, amen. I mean, like you really are unraveling the real root of this, because I want to like for people who may not see how this is directly tied together. Let me tie it together for you, because in the state of Georgia, we had Black Voters Matter, co-founder Cliff Albright. they actively pushed against these laws in Georgia that were aimed at voter suppression. They had been working against it for months. And they approached all of the corporations around Delta Airlines, Coca-Cola, and said, we need your help on this. We need your help. And most of those corporations kind of fiddle their thumbs and did nothing until the laws were passed. Then they put out statements saying, we condemn these laws. How convenient, when you could have stood with us corporations when we needed you. But instead, what they did was they played the game. And you have to ask yourself this question, like, why would these corporations who absolutely benefit from black dollars every single day of every single minute of every day, why would they allow Republicans to get away with this and anger black people? Because they've done a cost benefit analysis and they know that we're more likely to continue buying their product and not boycott them than we are to actually stand up and see how they are just as culpable for the infringement of our voting rights as any Republican.
Absolutely. And then to go one step further and say how many of these corporations are actually funding the campaign of these politicians who are demolishing our right to vote.
That's it.
Because when you start digging, you might be surprised what you find. You might really be surprised to find out if your employer financially supported Trump or other GOP leaders who are now actively, intentionally trying to suppress black voters.
They contribute to Republicans all the time. See, this is that bipartisan thing that we talk about all the time. See, when they say bipartisanship, they're saying something that's going to be to the benefit of people who want to harm us. That's what this, when Joe Biden, bless his heart, says bipartisanship, he's talking about reaching across the aisle to join hands with people who actively want to harm us, even if no other form than suppressing our right to vote. That is an infraction. That is harm. But they want to work, and they not only want to work across the aisle, they're showing that they're not willing. The Democratic establishment, that they are not willing to fight against the filibuster, to get rid of it, and to fight against Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin in order to protect our right to vote. So while the corporations are playing a game on one side, saying, oh, we can't possibly help you, and then when the law is passed, they put out a weak statement saying we condemn. No, we needed your help before that. Black Voters Matters needed your help before that. Democrats on the other side playing a similar game where they're like, oh, we couldn't possibly get rid of the filibuster. We couldn't possibly get Joe Manchin in shape. And what's at the center being destroyed? Black people's right to vote.
I'm glad you brought up Biden. Correct me if I'm wrong. Has he spoken on this issue?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a great issue to speak on. You know, it gives him, he gets high fives every time he talks about the attack on the right to vote.
Because I don't know what it is about his leadership that feels very passive. And I know the DOJ is an extension of his administration. I understand that, but it just feels like he could be doing more. I don't know. Ever since he came into office, it just feels like he's very passive, and I don't know. That's just my opinion.
Well, I mean, no, to be sure, he is actively trying to find a way to be bipartisan with the Republican Party. And in that way, he's not going to fight. What you're saying is objectively true, because if his priority is bipartisanship, then he is not going to actively fight the Republicans the way they need to be fought. He's just not going to do it because he wants to be able to reach across the aisle and join hands with them. Now, if and ever he comes to the realization that he cannot be bipartisan with them, and he actually means it, because he said something a couple of months ago that I was like, oh, okay, maybe he realizes that the Republican Party is too intransigent to do anything. But he still seeks these opportunities for bipartisanship when they have the power in the House, the Senate, as well as the White House to get done everything that we need done. We're not talking about reparations. We're talking about the right to vote. And if we can't even get the right to vote, how and to have that protected and enshrined and not up for debate, then how can we expect to get anything from this country? Anything.
Well, And I think, the difference between like speaking on something and taking action, right? And so I feel like when Obama was president, he would make statements and the country would stop and pause and listen to him. And there would be some follow up. And so with Biden, I feel like, to your point, it's like he's not really trying to ruffle feathers. He's trying to play both sides of the fence. He acknowledges that the Black vote is what got him into office. And so, of course, he has to speak on it. But is he really willing to compromise any of his political power or potential for bipartisanship to advance and protect the Black vote?
See, look, I mean, I love the way you flipped it and reversed it, right? So it's not even about him protecting his power. It's about him protecting our ability to help this country, right? Like we're talking about, will Joe Biden go out and do whatever is necessary to protect Black people's right to vote? And it is 2021. Like there should be nothing. They should have overturned every table, thrown every rock. I mean, shut everything down. This should not be up for debate in 2021. If we cannot secure our right to vote in this country in 2021, why do we have a democracy? Well, the Republicans are more than happy to ask that same question and install Donald Trump as their answer.
Yeah. And Ben, we always talk about these really hard issues and the challenges that we face in America, especially those of us who are Black or biracial, BIPOC, right? And it can be heavy day after day after day, talking about all of the forces that are aligned against us to try to set us back, to try to make things harder for us. All of this stuff, it can be hard to internalize. And I found myself asking myself this question, what is it about being American am I still proud of? Why do I still love this country? Why do I still choose to live here? Because ultimately at the end of the day, and I heard a lot of this, if people were saying like, if Trump is reelected, people are going to leave the country and go live somewhere else, right? But so he didn't. But now still it feels like there's so many people who are complicit. There are so many people who are not complicit and just actively attacking our right to vote. People who are sitting back and not passing bills on police accountability. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So what is it about this country? And not that you have to answer it, but for those of you even joining us in this conversation, ask yourself, what is it about this country that you love? Why do you love being American?
In our when we get to the like it or not segment, that's where we would start singing and mocking, and I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free, right? I got nothing left but the fact that I need America to succeed. I personally need America to succeed because I've got children.
Yeah.
America failing is not a simple transition to, oh, we're doing something new now. America failing is the collapse has the potential of a new dark ages and the collapse of society, period. And I know that might be dramatic, but really play it out. I mean, we're talking about, look what happened after the Roman Empire fell, right? It was 500 years of darkness after that. And so I need America to win, not in the evil, militaristic, global domination, warfare way that they have been dominating for years, because not only does that come back to haunt us, as Jeremiah Wright said, but it also is what they do abroad is what we see them doing domestically to us. These tanks that they have in our streets and Black communities came first from Afghanistan and then Iraq. And so what we're doing globally on the foreign stage, we see the blowback coming to the United States. I'm not talking about terrorism. I'm talking about the terrorism of the police state. That is a direct result of American imperialism. And so I need America to win by being what it promised it could be, and not by playing these games. We're at the bottom of the barrel here. we're not even talking about America becoming a more perfect union. We're talking about the right to vote. Can we have a democracy? Yes, no, maybe so. Y'all tell us, America.
Well, what do you say after that, Ben? I believe in the American dream. I believe in the American dream. And so my sentiment is similar to yours. You know, I'm willing to work hard, but I want it to pay off. And the frustrating thing is that it feels like you can work hard, but there's someone out there who's trying to prevent you from being able to vote. Yeah. You know, and so the American dream has to be true for all of us, or it's not true for any of us. That you should be able to come here, work hard, and you can have a good life. I think it's a very simple value that our country was founded on. And even knowing that one of those founding principles was the fact that immigrants could come here and have that mentality, and the next generation would be better off. But even in recent years, we've seen immigration rights attacked, which is like, that is what... Okay. I digress. It's 7:30. We're on the clock. So I will let you get to it. Thank you all for joining us. Make sure to tune back tomorrow for more. In the meantime, keep it here for more on the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome again. Now it's time for the show. Welcome a lot. Welcome or not. What the hell? Like it or not, it's about to go down. Make sure that you stay tuned, y'all. This is your boy, DJ Exclusive. Good morning. Good morning again, everyone. Welcome in. Get situated, get settled, grab your tea, your coffee, your beverage, whatever it is you need to get your morning started, y'all. It's Like It or Not. Your boy, James Weber Williams, DJ Exclusive, the hardest working man that do this damn thing, y'all. Welcome. It's Like It or Not, y'all. I may have been out yesterday, but I told y'all I was going to bring y'all some new music. I would have had it for y'all yesterday, but man, the way my life was set up in my stomach, it wasn't going to happen. Courtney, good morning. You better tell him, Courtney. Tell him to sit down somewhere, please. Chuck Diesel, do not break anything. Brenda, good morning. Savage, sweetheart, good morning. Brother Chuck Diesel, shout out, man. Marcus in the chat, good morning, brother Marcus. Y'all, it is time for the show. Make sure that you stay tuned. Like it or not is about to go Dow.
Like It or Not with Benjamin Dixon starts now.
Good morning, people. Good morning, brothers. How's it going on, y'all?
Good morning and welcome to Like It or Not, where we're free to tell the truth and not care who doesn't like it. We're
being an even.
James, I just walked right all over your tie. My bad.
Damn,
I'm sorry.
You see how you do, brother Carl?
Hey, brother DJ, he is the man now.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, pray my strength. So let me, just for the sake of doing it properly, welcome to Like It or Not, where we're free to tell the truth
and not care who doesn't like it.
That's what I'm talking about. Today is Tuesday, June 29, 2021. Thanks so much for joining us. Rebecca Azor is out on vacation. We are joined by none other than Brother Carl Mack, Dr. Carl Mack. He is our historian, and he has been bringing so much truth to historical context to our conversations. And Brother Mack, so glad to have you again this morning.
Always, Brother Ben. Thank you so much.
The pleasure is ours. Go ahead.
Absolutely.
Listen, man, I so enjoyed the conversation about voter suppression with you and Sister Georgia. And so I sent to you a document that most people have never seen. And I don't know if David can put it up. But, when you talk about the history of voter suppression, I actually lived that, through my mother. And my mother, I want you to imagine that my mother had a poll tax card that she shared with me. And so I have that poll tax card in my possession.
Wow.
And if we can bring it up.
Oh, wow.
Just
where did you send it? It might take us a second to grab it. Yeah. Let us know where you sent it. But you have the actual poll tax.
I have the actual card. And so I texted to both you and David.
Okay.
So check your text box on it. And if you can bring it up, because it is such a profound document to look at. And so I want you to imagine that during that time, my mother had to pay $2. Let me see what year that was. Let me see, 1965. So wow. I was 3 years old. And imagine that my mother had to pay $2 to vote. Black folks in Mississippi had to pay $2 to vote. And when I spoke to Mama Rose about it, she also told me that when they all came together as a collective community and talked about all the voter suppression issues that were going to face them, another part of it was that they were going to be quizzed on the Constitution. So they had to learn the Constitution, because when they would go in there, they would get questions about the Constitution from people who didn't know the Constitution.
Come on.
Those were the efforts that were taking place in order to suppress the Black vote. And so when Georgia, made the statement about people asking the question, why should I even stay in America? And although there are millions and millions of reasons, I want us to hearken back to the election of the first Black president in the history of this country. And how many times did we see images and pictures of older Black folks who cried? And they cried because never in their lifetime did they think that we would ever see this. And so as it applies to my mama, I think back to her paying $2 to vote when they were voting for people that did not even have their interest, but they knew that someday, somewhere, as Georgia so eloquently stated, that the most dangerous weapon, according to Brother John Lewis, that's nonviolent, is the right to vote. And so by them continuing that, even at a time when America wasn't what she said she was, they kept pressing on to make America even better. So out of all the millions and millions of reasons that we have, the bloodshed that we fought for this country, that's just one personal example for me. And I asked my mom, I said, Mama, why would you do that? And she said, baby, without that vote, we're going to be even further behind. And she she envisioned that better day. But could she have seen Barack Obama being elected, a Black man being elected president, and now we have a Black woman being president? So that's why we'll never leave this country. We will continue to make her live up to that image of democracy, that ideology of all men created equal. It ain't where we want it to be. But if we give up it'll never be what it should be.
Well, oh wow, there it is. There it is.
Wow.
So that is an actual document of my mama and so many other Black folks. This is voter suppression, real life, family. Real life. In my lifetime, my mama having to pay $2 to vote. And imagine what $2 was in 1965.
Yeah.
You know, today, if you told people they had to pay 50 cents, a quarter to vote, they'd be like, man, I ain't paying no quarter to vote.
Yeah.
My mother paid $2 in 1965. And that is why I ain't never leaving this country. So,
you know, that's that is so powerful to actually see that and for you to have that in your possession and as a constant reminder of what this country actually is. You know, and what it actually does do. This is why they don't want us teaching. We have several guests coming up. We're going to bring them into the conversation, but this is why they don't want us to teach critical race theory. And when I say critical race theory, I'm not talking about what it is specifically as it's defined by the people who created theory. I'm talking about this general catchphrase that you know, they're saying if history is ever told by the oppressed, then it would not be good for the oppressors. Oh, well, that's not our problem. And in its historical context, like you just gave us in terms of what your mother had to go through, what our parents and our ancestors had to actually go through. They don't want us to teach history from the perspective of the slave on the bottom of the slave ship, because it would drive people to a fury and things might actually change. So that's what they fear. They fear the accurate history. Brother, thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
When you talk about history, I need people to keep this in mind. History helps you to think critically. So I can remember one time when I didn't really care about the right to vote. But when I thought about what my mama went through, when I thought about and I read history of the beatings that Fannie Lou Hamer went through, all of our ancestors went through, I was like ashamed not to vote. And that is the kind of action that understanding our experience in this country moves us to make it better. Yeah.
Yeah. Brother Carl, you have we have a couple of guests. One, we have Olay Olurin, and she has been here with us before. She's a public defender, and she has. There's a ongoing conversation in this nation. Olay, thank you for joining us. How are you this morning?
Good. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much. We saw your tweet thread about how frequent Black people are killed. It's so much that we could do a daily thread around it. And as we talk about voting rights and we talk about the challenges to it, there's similar structural impediments to us getting changes to the policing in this country. And Brother Mac, before we even go on in the conversation, we also have a couple of other guests that I want. Would you introduce the audience, our other guests, because I want to let's have the full conversation.
Yes. I'll tell you this, and when I was in the framework of the NAACP, the Seattle King County NAACP, of course we fought against police brutality. I ended up getting arrested for leading a protest that we marched on the freeway. So was very much in line with what was happening in law enforcement, even in Seattle, which is supposed to be this whole liberal, emerald green, everybody's welcome country, right? and dealing with law enforcement, I had never in all of my life ever met a law enforcement officer who was active, who spoke out against obvious wrong, until I came across the sister that we're going to hear from today, Captain Sonia Pruitt, who is now retired. This sister is absolutely an expert, and she showed such courage when she spoke out as a member of a Black Law Enforcement Association. Even that association told her to kind of back down. And when I'm talking about speaking out, I'm talking about Tamir Rice, Eric Garner, Trayvon Martin, all these cases that we heard about. I never saw law enforcement active speak out against it. And that's what our Shiro does here. And then another person that we're going to bring on is a brother that I have a great deal of respect to. We are brothers in the NAACP. He too was president of the Seattle King County NAACP, and he's also attorney, James Bible. And Brother Bible has been absolutely phenomenal in protecting and going after unlawful law enforcement. And so he's in the Seattle area. And right now, if you see him dressed very casually, it's because Seattle is having some absolutely abnormal weather. I mean, it's like over 100 degrees in Seattle.
Yeah. No. Okay.
So anyway,
T-shirts are in order.
Yes,
exactly.
And so there's a case that took place in Tacoma that is very much similar to Arbery's case, where this brother got murdered. Manuel Ellis case was undercover for so long. And his sister actually called me, even though I'm in Maryland, still called me and said, Brother Matt, is there anything you could do to help? I said, yeah, I got 2 words for you, James Bible. And so Brother Bible is here to join us, and he too can lend knowledge to the conversation about police reform. So I think the panelists that we have today brings a wealth of knowledge. And Captain Pruitt is going to talk about this bill that is before us that really, I don't know much about the George Floyd bill that's before Congress. But if there is an expert on that subject, I think the 3 of these panelists are absolutely going to bring an enlightening conversation to us. So with that said, back to you, Brother Dixon.
No, I appreciate that. I'm excited. So good morning, Attorney Bible. Good morning, Captain Pruitt. And again, good morning again, Ole. Thank you all so much for joining us. We have in front of us like the I think a good range in the conversation about police violence against Black lives. And Ole, you come from the public defender side, but also from the activist Black woman experience. You're Black in America. Captain Pruitt, you are Black in America, but you come from the law enforcement background, retired police captain, and then Attorney Bible. You're on the side of the legal system of fighting for justice through the courts for our people. So thank you all so much for joining us this morning. I would actually, could you, so the audience that may not be familiar with you, could you just really briefly introduce yourself? I want to start with Attorney Bible.
Thank you for having me. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Yeah. So I am a former president NAACP, former public defender, active advocate in terms of policing and police accountability. When I was in law school, I created an organization directly related to getting accountability and policy change within the state of Washington and nationally in terms of police accountability. But it all started when I was 13 years old and thrown up against a wall by a police officer with 2 other Black friends of mine and accused of jaywalking when in fact we did not. It was something that actually followed me on my record as I went to college and graduated from college and was told that I actually had criminal history when I knew I did not, and almost didn't get my very first job out of college because of it. Since then, since moving on from the public defender's office, which I'll say the public defender's office is actually one of the front lines of police accountability because they actually get to know all of the officers intimately, what they do to folks that have little in terms of resources and disproportionately African-American folks and Latino individuals as well. Went on to handle police accountability issues through civil litigation and pressing for prosecution. Manuel Ellis is amongst many of the cases that I have right now involving wrongful death as a result of police violence. What we learned was that not only did he say, "I can't breathe, sir," we learned the response of the officers as he was saying, "I can't breathe, sir," was actually "shut the fuck up." As they choked him out, then hogtied him, and then put a spit mask over his head and stood over him and watched him die. The narrative that was put forth by law enforcement was that he had superhuman strength, was incredibly dangerous, that they were in a struggle for their life. And for 3 months, they almost got away with that. They hid it. We found a Ring video that actually showed us all that he was saying he couldn't breathe, sir. That showed what the officers were saying in response. But what was especially disheartening about that video is we saw in that video an officer walking up the stairs to talk to the person whose Ring video it was. So we learned that they actually had it within a day of the incident and created a false narrative nonetheless about what had happened, and that lasted for 3 months until we found 2 other videos.
Yeah.
So I guess what I would say is it's not only the high profile instances that we see or have seen on television, it's also the daily degradation, the space that we're in terms of just about every part and corner of the United States where these sorts of instances are occurring repeatedly over and over again on video and not, that are delayed, hidden, and any system that we create is only as good as the sum of its parts. And the reality is that our sums are faulty. So we've got work to do.
Wow. Olay, when he mentioned, when Brother Mac mentioned Brother Ellis, you knew about it right away. Because in the thread that you shared, that was a second. Yeah. Tell us about that thread, but also in context of this brother who is yet another victim of police violence.
So I started that thread because I think what happens is you hear about a few cases of police brutality. And even within the few that we had that get the national attention, most things we don't see, quote unquote, justice in the form of charges or the attention that's paid to it. And I think what happens is the nation gets caught up debating individual cases, right? They get in this whole conversation of, well, was this justified? Who was this person? Who was that? And then it becomes like these are these isolated incidents or these mistakes or these aberrations, when in actuality, this is happening every single day. There's so many more cases, just as outrageous, just as horrible, that you didn't hear before, As I'm listening to the details of Manuel Ellis, I'm like, wow, that's so similar to what happened to Marvin Crawford III in Texas, who they just declined to charge the officers there. These things are constant. And that's why I started the thread, because I think it's important that people realize that there are so many people who are losing their lives to police brutality, so many communities, so many families that are being affected, and we're not even hearing about it, even though there are fights happening. Every time you look up the case, you find people like Attorney Bible that are fighting these cases, their family, their community on this level, but they're not being given the attention because they want to create this narrative that, these are mistakes. These are egregious circumstances that happen here and there. But in actuality, policing is fine. Police brutality isn't the issue that you think it is. But in actuality, it's much like what we're hearing, right? This tragedy, Emmanuel Ellis, he was killed last year in 2020. 968 plus people were killed by the police that we know of. And it's important that we say that we know of, because in the same way they created a false narrative for Emmanuel Ellis, and that they happen to find that out. How many things aren't we finding out? How many things, how many false narratives are they being successful at painting? So that's why I started that thread.
Thank you, sister.
And Captain Pruitt, from your perspective, retired captain, I can't imagine, just from your side of the perspective, you have been very, very vocal, speaking out against what is happening and the backlash. I'm sure the backlash has to be very unnerving, but also kind of sobering, because you've been here before. Talk about it from your perspective as retired police officer.
Yeah, you just said a mouthful. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. So yeah, I spent 28 years in the police department. I guess it was about 15 years in is when I realized that stuff was really going the wrong way as far as my perception of what policing was supposed to be like. I came from a policing family. My father was a MP in the Army, and then he did 20 years in Metropolitan Police Department in Washington, D.C. So I was, kind of geeked about following in my father's footsteps to some extent. It took me 26 years to make captain. And the reason for that was not because I was lacking in my education or skill set or any of the experience. I was, I was taking on everything I could so I could, plump up my resume. But it was because of discrimination. And if you are a Black officer, you're going to face discrimination at some point. And if you are a Black female officer, it gets really bad, right? So from my perspective, about 15 years in is when I started being very, very vocal. And the threats came to my family. not getting backed up on calls, being called names, being harassed at work. And so I come from a family of like very strong matriarchal. We don't just back down. So for me, that was a challenge. That meant to me that there was something that I needed to do. And what I needed to do was to speak truth. I needed to always be honest, and I needed to be a protector for my community. Because when I went home and took off my uniform, I was going to be this brown girl, right?
Right.
I was always going to be Black. The uniform was just what I did for a living. So that encapsulates a short version of how I feel. So when I decided to retire, it was at a point where I felt like my voice could be expanded more if I was outside of the police department, because I was spending too much time having to fight on the inside. I needed to free up my time so that I could teach the public what they needed to know to navigate this fight that we're in. I don't know. I don't like using the words police reform. I don't know how you reform something that's already bad. But we are in a fight. And so to that extent, I need to be able to teach people what it is that they need to know about the system so that we can win this fight.
And Brother Dixon, let me just add this, is that Captain Pruitt, you were in Montgomery County, correct?
That's correct.
And could you just tell us some of the cases that you publicly spoke out against, and what that meant in forms of threats? How did your fellow officers take your speaking out about these particular cases? So if you could just list some of those cases that you publicly spoke out against.
So, Carl, I think what you're thinking about is when I was the chair of the National Black Police Association. I went in with the thought that, we are a national organization, and so we need to be speaking on a national level. We used to do that. I don't know what happened. So that's what we're going to do now. And so we spoke out about Tamir Rice, of course, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor. I'm getting older, so my memory, but
it shouldn't be that many names for you to have to remember.
Right, exactly. But my goal was to make sure that people knew that there was a cadre of Black police officers who were not down with the bull. Okay. I ran into some roadblocks because not even all Black people are comfortable with when you're very vocal. And that includes Black officers, even though they know that we as officers are under the gun, that we were facing discrimination ourselves. It takes a certain kind of person to be comfortable with actually saying those things. I was that person, and I told them, you let me be the mouthpiece. I don't have a problem speaking. So I did lots of press releases, lots of press. Finally, they're like, there are some Black officers out here who are actually doing this work. My tenure was short-lived. I only had 2 years. And so I decided to create my own venture called the Black Police Experience, where I can still educate the community about the intersection between race and the Black community in particular, and other vulnerable communities, so that that people can feel empowered as we do this work.
I am tempted with the voices that we have on the screen. I'm tempted to try to solve the whole equation, right? I think we have some with you all's permission, I just want to dig in. We won't try to solve everything, but I think that we can illuminate some things here, because Ole, as Sister Pruitt, Captain Pruitt was saying, how can you reform something that is broken? I saw you behind the screens. You had the same reaction that I did. Tell us about that reaction to that statement.
I think too often we talk about police reform and criminal reform presents the system as though it's making a mistake. And I know we hear that all the time. The system is working exactly as intended, but I think it's deeper than that. Like even down to the criminal justice system, like it's called that so that people buy in, right? Like it's this intentional misnomer, right? Like, oh, this is what the system is in the business of doing. And so every time you hear about it not doing that, it seems like an error, when in actuality, the system is functioning exactly how it's supposed to. And I think that's why I'm not here for when you hear police reform. I'm like, policing is going how they intended to go. There's a reason why every single time, even the soft initiatives that real, reformists and real activists aren't behind, just that they don't think it's going to create substantial change. Every time it's presented, the police across the country resist. They fight it, tooth and nail. If it were in fact a mistake, all these incidents of brutality, all these things that we keep hearing, if these are errors, then why aren't all the police saying, okay, right? But instead what happens is every time, someone's killed by the police or there's some police brutality or there's an error with the police, they all get dressed up in military gear and, and invade every protest around the country and make it very clear, no, we stand behind what's happening. I had in January a case of the police kneeled on my client's neck, Sir Carlisle Arnold in Queens. And I thought it was important that I got his charges dismissed, but they refused to charge the officer. And what I thought was important was they didn't even condemn his behavior. You know what I mean? They didn't say, oh, we specifically what the Queen's DA says was she supported the spirit of the legislation, which was the legislation they passed following George Floyd's death, saying, they're making it illegal for these certain kinds of restraints, which were already legal in New York City since 1993. But, that's going to become the talking point. It's illegal now. It's not going to happen. Soon as, what happens, I have my case, they refuse to charge the officer and they don't just not charge him. They don't even say it's wrong. So my client happened to live, but here is this initiative that we've seen time and time again has killed people. Y'all said y'all about outlawed it, and that's going to be the answer, right? We're getting this police reform, we're getting this criminal reform. And the moment there is an opportunity to enforce it, you won't do it. And I think it's important to know that it does not matter how many laws you pass. It does not matter how much reform you pass if it's not going to be held against the police. If the rules don't apply to you, then it does not matter.
Right. Brother Attorney Bible, you guys got to forgive me. I'm prone to call everybody brother and sister, so it's no disrespect to your titles, to your official title. But Brother Bible, like from what Olay is saying, like this is structural. This is working the way it's intended to work. What do you find when you're fighting for justice? Because we see those same structural impediments in the legal side of the criminal justice system as we do on the enforcement side of the criminal justice system. What are you seeing from your perspective?
Okay, so first I'll say my preferred title is Bible.
Okay.
Brother Bible.
Brother Bible
okay. Is exactly what you can call me.
All right.
And I'm comfortable with that. In terms of what we see here in our society, the institutions that are in play are only so good as the sum of its parts. But ultimately what we look at here and have to look at is the reality is that we have only scratched the very surface of what's happening and what's going on here in terms of accountability. Police accountability doesn't operate in a vacuum. The inequities that are present here are present in every part of our system of justice, of employment, of health, of political action, everything. It's just amplified because they have the ability to kill you and get away with it in front of your face, even with video. What we see is a very harsh reality in terms of lynching still being present in the United States of America. We haven't broken through in such a way where we authentically just say that and truly unpack how we came to be and pull things back. We don't even fire police officers that kill people. The reality is, in the Manuel Ellis case, there are 3 officers charged with murder, all of whom are still getting paid by the city of Tacoma. That's the reality. And as we dug deeper, we found out on some level the city of Tacoma actually assisted in posting their bail. So what does that tell you about our system of justice and how far we actually have to go in terms of changing anything? And in terms of George Floyd, because I was called in relation to that matter, asked me, how did I feel? Which is a crazy question to ask a person on television. How do you feel about George Floyd when it first came out? But I had to say that in the state of Washington, before noon, at that time, I was already dealing with 5 separate wrongful deaths involving police officers. One man who was holding his baby who was shot in the face. This is well over a year and a half ago, who they haven't even investigated to determine what happened yet and why. Another where a young man who was being stopped by police you hear one screaming, "Put your hands up," while the other screaming, "Get down on the ground." And you could see in the video that he's doing this. And as soon as they tell him to get on the ground, he goes to the ground. And they said that was an aggressive movement. And he got shot and killed. And really, he was in a absolute no-win sort of situation, because no matter what he did, he was going to die. And that falls in the face of all the training that I did with the NAACP in terms of reaching out to kids and how to interact with law enforcement. So then I started to think, maybe you just stand there and get beat up, but you keep your hands in the air. And then they'll say that you assaulted them, but maybe you have a chance of living through that moment. Because as a public defender that is present, I see her raising her hand. One of the ways that I first started actually handling police accountability is when I left the public defender's office, I started handling assault of police officer cases, and then turning around and suing them after we won. But really, ultimately, I can say that it's changed little to nothing, because the systems that we have here in place don't want to believe that Black people are being lynched in America.
But Mr. President, and to all of you, we keep talking about the system gives them a pass. But there's a reason. Instead of saying the system, let's speak specifically about why that system gives them a pass. So can you all explain to us the concept of qualified immunity?
Well, let's start with Captain Pruitt. Could you help us to understand that and how that shields police officers in the system from ever actually having some accountability?
Yeah. So qualified immunity is a doctrine. It is not a law. It is not something that's codified on a book somewhere where you can charge someone or not charge them. It is a way of thinking, and judges use it very broadly to protect government employees, or government agents, but in particular, police officers are really benefiting from it. So it keeps, let's say that you have a family member that has been injured or killed by the police, and you want to sue the officers. So the judge has a couple of standards that he thinks about or she thinks about in order to figure out whether you can sue these police officers. The standard that bothers me the most is the one that says, well, there has to be some sort of precedent. There has to be another case that was exactly like your case in order for us not to offer qualified immunity to the officer. Can you imagine how many different cases? There's probably some cases out here that are just alike, but we may not know which ones they are. And so that's a really high standard to meet, right? And so most of the time, and even more increasingly so in this country over the last, 10 or 12 years, officers have been allowed to get away with murder and assault and all kinds of other things because judges have said, well, you can't sue them because of qualified immunity. And then the local government gets sued and they pay out, but they're paying with taxpayers' dollars, and taxpayers are the actual victims of qualified immunity as far as I'm concerned. So that's like the short version of qualified immunity. Let me just say one more thing.
Yes, please.
Qualified immunity, when you hear police unions argue that, oh, it's going to take away protections from police officers, they got to do their jobs and they got to do things, make these split-second decisions, they might make mistakes. There are already safeguards in place for police officers. They are U.S. citizens most of the time. And so they're covered by the Constitution. If you're working for a police department, you're covered by the Constitution. As far as frivolous lawsuits are concerned, all lawsuits are, and I'm sure our attorneys can speak to this, all lawsuits are reviewed by a prosecutor before they go forward. And so if it's something frivolous, they're going to throw that out anyway. So what you're hearing is a lot of smoke, mirrors, and lies about qualified immunity. But the real truth is it does offer protections. And if you put a police officer's salary and his family's house on the line, I contend that some of these incidents that we're having would go away.
So what do we expect, Olay? We give these officers all the toy guns they would ever need, real guns. We give them toys, and they go and they dress up as soldiers. They run out in the streets, and they have no accountability. Right. We give them the weapons with no accountability, and then we give them a layer of protection through qualified immunity. Olay.
So I wanna make sure I be clear up front. Qualified immunity is bad, and we do need to get rid of it, right? However, I don't think it is the answer to police brutality. In the same way that I think responding to crime with, police and criminal prosecution and all these different things don't actually address the root of crime. Like, it's supposed to be seen as like this deterrence, right? But in actuality, crime comes from poverty and all these other kind of social ills. So it doesn't prevent crime when you over police these neighborhoods, you do all these things. In the same way, I don't think police brutality comes from how policing is done in this country, right? Police are, allegedly citizens like the rest of us. The law is supposed to apply to them. They are supposed to. Murder is a crime. You know what I mean? The rest of us know murder is a crime. You go to jail, and they still murder people willy-nilly on video, broad daylight, witnesses around, because they know that the law is not applied to them. So while I do believe, yes, there needs to be this, this redress after the fact, I'm very concerned with how we prevent incidents of police brutality in the first place. And that requires for us to change policing, where they're placed, the weapons we've given them, importantly, the funding that we are giving them and not giving to our communities. So yes, it's important, but I don't think it's necessarily the answer. And I don't think, there aren't any statistics that show that this is going to act as this major deterrence to them. Because like I said, there are a whole lot of other things in place that are supposed to be, very tough to the rest of us that are not acting as deterrents to police. So I don't believe for 1 second that, qualified immunity is getting rid of that means they're going to stop doing this, because cities have shown us, and police department, everyone has shown us that they will find ways to bend over backwards for the police and to make it possible for them to continue exactly what it is they intend to do. So I do agree with, Captain Pruitt, and I do believe that this is obviously a flaw in a flaw. Let me make sure I don't say a flaw in our system. But I don't think it by itself is not enough. A lot more needs to happen, starting with where we're putting the funding into policing and criminalizing our communities instead of giving them the resources that they need to thrive.
But Sister Olay, and I certainly agree to it, that there's no panacea, no one specific thing, but we use the term system. There's a flawed system. And I think qualified immunity is one part of that. And so, Attorney Bible, I think another part of it is the relationship between law enforcement and prosecutors. So can you speak to that, both, all three of you, and give us some insight on what is the relationship between prosecutors and law enforcement as to why, in the case of Captain Pruitt, she says, they'll just throw out cases, or they'll look at any cases potentially frivolous.
Absolutely. So in the state of Washington, I've consistently pushed for a separate entity to prosecute police officers. We need that here. We finally had our breakthrough year in terms of that creation of that through the state. It hasn't exactly happened yet. And though it's been voted on by the legislature and passed, I think that the reality is now we have several layers to go in terms of what that department looks like, who it's run by, whether it's citizen driven and the like. But it's critical to have a separate independent agency that investigates and prosecutes police conduct. The reality is local jurisdictions and local prosecutors work too closely with law enforcement to such a degree that they're reliant upon them with their other prosecutions, are in a place where they're defending not just the officer, but also against civil litigation often because they're linked to the county. And as a result, we get more cover-ups than actual activity. This will be something that we will always be challenged with, and we'll always have to challenge our systems. But local jurisdictions are incapable of authentically representing the interests of people when it comes to policing their independent officers. Case employed is actually that local jurisdictions tend to negotiate away their ability to actually hold officers accountable in the first place via their contracts. So we have to touch on that as well.
So Captain Pruitt, but I'm talking specifically, what is the relationship between prosecutors and law enforcement? Because it's my understanding that prosecutors have to have a, quote, good relationship with law enforcement officers, because as they're bringing charges, they get the story from law enforcement. So because they work so closely with them, there's a relationship that develops. So, can you talk to us about specifically the relationship between prosecutors and law enforcement?
Well, in a perfect world where a criminal justice system actually had justice, you would have, the police would do their thing and, make a valid arrest, and they would take it to the prosecutor. The prosecutor would review the case and says, okay, these charges that you filed, we're good with it. Or, we're going to add some charges, or we're going to take away some charges. Talk to the officer about whether there's going to be a plea, whether we're going to take this to court. I mean, there is a relationship, but this is what I'm noticing in the last couple of years, the last few years, because we're having more progressive DAs and state's attorneys in the country that are starting this movement towards minimizing minor things like the possession of some marijuana, saying we're not prosecuting that, or we're looking at doing more about checking out these officers and placing charges on them when they do something wrong. We're starting to see this movement, this trend, and it's slow, but it's there. And so what's happening now, there was this relationship where the police felt comfortable. Oh, we can always count on the prosecution or the DA or the state's attorney not to bring charges against us and to always push forward our cases. That's changing now. And I'm glad to see it, because it should be an autonomous relationship. The state's attorney in Chicago, is she a DA? Kim Foxx? So, short story, I had to go to Chicago to speak at the Rainbow Coalition. This was right after, I think it was the International Association of Chiefs of Police conference, and some things were going down in Chicago, and they were coming after Kim Foxx. And all the police chiefs in Illinois had gotten together, did a press conference, and talked about her like a dog, basically. And most of them were white. I called a black police chief and I said, I'm coming to Chicago to talk about this, and I need to know where you stand on this, because you're a member of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Officers. Noble. And he says, well, I like Kim, but she won't do what we say. And I said, well, does she have to? I mean, her job is to decide whether the case is worth moving forward, whether the charges are valid. I mean, and he said, well, I tell you what, when you speak, you let them know that you talk to me, but we're not going to say anything on her behalf. And so that was a signal to me, like, okay, that she's not doing what they want them to do. And that's great. She shouldn't be. And so, yes, there is a relationship, but the relationship should be such that if we have a real, true criminal justice system, then that prosecutor should be allowed to do their job in a way that, is objective and neutral.
Absolutely. Olay, I want to toss this to you, because what Sister Pruitt, what she's saying there really is the problem. The only adversarial part of this system is when it's towards Black people. We don't have that adversarial structure as it pertains to accountability for police in this country. Speak to that.
Listen, I don't mince words. The prosecutors and the police are boys, okay? Friends, homies, lovers, friends, boys. They keep everybody in the court. I'm in the court every day, and everybody in the court is in a team together besides you. That's just the reality of it is. The judge is helping the prosecutor is doing what they need to do for the cops. Even progressive prosecutors, like I said, the Queens DA, Melinda Katz, who I mentioned earlier, who only supported the spirit of the legislation, progressive prosecutor, ran on an accountability ticket of holding the police accountable. The reality is this: the prosecutor's office, no matter how progressive the agenda is, or what it is they intend to do, they're in the game of convictions, they're in the game of prosecution, and they need the police to do that, and they need the police on board what they're doing. Those are their witness. Often that's their entire case. Their entire case is the police officer's statement, the police testifying. So they have to be cool with them. And it's not just a matter of, I don't want to make it seem like, oh, they have to be cool with them, like they're being pulled and dragged along. They're happily working in concert. I don't want you to think like that's why I always say, people talk about, one aspect of the system. They always talk about, just the police or justice. I know the police, the prosecutor, the judges, everybody is working in concert. They all deal with your clients in the same way. They all treat the police narrative as true right out of the arraignment. So while there are, there's, I'm not saying there aren't some DAs that are more progressive than others. There are, absolutely. And there are, and I want to be clear too, that even when prosecutors or district attorneys are still, doing the police's bidding to a large point, or they're not considered friends of the defense, they still get pushback from the police, who feel upset that they're not listening to everything. And that's not a reflection to me on how progressive the prosecutor is or how good this is or progress in the system. It's just a reflection of how large this police state is and how much power we've given police, how much authority they feel that they're not supposed to have any resistance to any of their things that they're doing. So my overall answer is the police and the prosecutors are boys.
And so let me also ask this question again. These questions are based in the concept of trying to define this system that we said is broken. And as part of that system, even the definition of homicide becomes an issue. So Attorney Brother Bible, if I'm gonna call him Mr. President, that's the way I always refer to him. So Mr. President, even something as plain as you're bringing charges of wrongful death. And then there becomes the debate of what is homicide. So can you speak to your experience in that arena?
Well, homicide actually authentically is the killing of a human being. And then there are justifications surrounding a homicide that sometimes are put into play. And with law enforcement officers and even prosecutors, they often start messaging immediately whatever it is that they can to make sure that officers are not held accountable. You see that in the original George Floyd statement. You see that in the original Manuel Ellis statement in relation to both of them having superhuman strength and having a health issue or whatever it might be, or being ultra aggressive. You see them saying essentially, back the blue, trust us, trust the badge, don't ask any questions. And often they get away with it throughout this country over and over and over again. I think that's a harsh reality here. So ultimately, what's called homicide becomes justifiable homicide, or within their policies and practices and necessary in order for them to decide, survive, and then they create this remarkable false narrative surrounding it. But let's be clear. For that, it's not just with officers. As a criminal defense attorney, I routinely saw if it was a white man attacking a black person, then self-defense, clearly, Mr. Bible, it's present and we have to dismiss this case. We're not going to move forward. But if it were a black man defending himself against anybody, the reality was that homicide was going to be filed. I had a case here in the state of Washington involving a black man that watched a white man kill his cousin, and he picked up a knife and he chased the white man, and he was the one that ended up in prison.
Wow.
So
wow.
In terms of homicide, how it's applied, how the law is actually applied, is dynamically different based upon your skin color. Defense, self-defense, all the exceptions to homicide don't really apply to black people. What I am told when I have a legitimate self-defense case for a black person is, well, Mr. Bible, this sounds like a triable case for you. You should go to a jury. Now, if I have a white person, it does not go that way. The direction that it goes is, well, clearly this is self-defense and we're going to dismiss this case. So it's not just law enforcement in terms of that. And that's a race dynamic that we have to deal with. Now, if you have a badge, then it becomes doubly so. I think the reality that we have to deal with is that folks are often allowed to just kill black people.
Wow.
They can find an excuse for it.
And let me ask a question. Again, in the framework of system, the system is broken. So Captain, what happens, and so many times we've seen the narrative, and Sister Olay talked about it, Mr. President talked about it, in regards to the prosecutors looking at the police reports. And of course, we've seen so many cases where police reports are falsified. So how does law enforcement deal with that if they know that a police report has been falsified, or there's proof brought that a police report was falsified? So that's, again, that's part of the system. So talk to us a little bit about that.
I feel like that's a rhetorical question, Dr. Matt. Because, I mean, just anecdotally, look at the cases that we know of in this country in recent years, where time and again, the officers lied about what was on the police report. The George Floyd case is a great example and a recent situation where they lied on the police report. They made it sound like he was struggling and fighting and stuff, and then all of a sudden he had a medical emergency. That was a lie. That was a lie. And so if you are a police leader and you are looking at these police reports, it is supposed to be incumbent upon you to look for those things that would indicate that something is amiss. But that's not happening. And it usually doesn't, because that's part of that system that you're talking about, that it has been okay for so long, since the inception of the slave patrol. I don't know if they were doing police reports or writing on barbell, but they were probably lying about it when they did it, especially when it came to talking about Black people. Okay. We always fight. We the big bad person. We're aggressive. And then all of a sudden, boom, we have a medical emergency and they got to take us to the hospital where we die. And they're like, oh my God, they died. I'm glad you brought it up, because it is a serious issue. And I contend that anybody who's putting their signature on a report and approving it and did not check to see if this was true or not, they should go down too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And Sister Olay, since, again, in this systemic issue, what's your thoughts about citizen, and you're saying that whenever changes can come about and maybe we can make this system better. One of the things that we fought for, Mr. President and I, when we were in the framework of the NAACP, is not just Citizens Review Board, because just the Citizens Review Board is like a lion with no claws and no teeth. Right. But a Citizens Review Board with full subpoena power, is that part of maybe can help the system in regards,
I think maybe it could help, but in my experience, even with the Citizens Review Board that we have here, they tend to do whatever the prosecution does. They wait, you file the complaint, you go and you do the interview, and then they just wait indefinitely until the prosecutor, like I told you, I had a case of police brutality in January, right? And once that happened, the Queens Public Corruptions Bureau said they were having an investigation, which, by the way, was just them acting as defense counsel for the police officer. And, we went to the Citizens Review Board. We did the interview there. We did all of that. And then they just pretty much wait. And then they just do exactly what the prosecutor's office says they're going to do. And the prosecutor's office waits. We all know the call for an investigation, song and dance, time drags out, and then the next thing you know, they quietly drop that they're not going to charge the officer. And that is what they did. Like months of me begging for, discovery, give me the video, give me the video, give me the body cam footage. The prosecutor tells me for months, he's like bouncing back between all these excuses as to why he can't get it. Then he tells me, oh, it's been damaged, it's been destroyed, it's been all of this. And then all of a sudden they release, I'm in the hair store and I see on the news, they're not charging the officer. Then they call me like, hey, didn't want you to see it in the news. You're not going to charge them. They're like, oh, we don't know if you've seen the other angle of the body cam footage that they told me doesn't exist.
Wow.
My client's neck isn't being kneeled on. I was like, so me, the video, my eyes, all the witnesses, everybody lied. And that's pretty much what happened. So I think all these things are, initiatives that are worth doing, and they might, bring some small incremental changes. But I think what we really need is a radical overhaul, unfortunately.
But what I'm asking about in regards to the Citizen Review Board, did the particular Citizens Review Board that you work with, did they have full subpoena power? And if so, can you explain to us, what does a Citizens Review Board with full subpoena power, what does it mean? Because I know in Seattle, when we fought for that, the biggest adversary, our biggest opponent against that was the police union. So
yeah, they're able of at least the Citizens Review Board in New York here, they're able to, subpoena all the files, get all the files that they need, and everybody is supposed to be working with them to get them all the information. So they technically, they have that power to do something, but it's the consensus among defense attorneys and public defenders here is little faith in it. I know when I, began my case, pretty much every defense attorney I spoke to was like, it's not even, a worthwhile use of time. We still did it. That's still happening. My client has a civil attorney, but they have the ability, and we don't see much coming from it. Because I think the problem is like I said, in the same way in the court, we have all these actors that are all working towards a common goal. Even outside of just the court, the judges, the prosecutors, we have people that are, trying to get certain positions of power. We have politicians. We have different people trying to make different moves for their careers, do things based on their personal relationship, their lives. There are a lot of different dynamics that are at play that aren't just there when we're talking about these things theoretically or what we want them to be or an application. It's something different. So I can't say I have all the faith in the world.
Wow. Ole, thank you so much, Sister Pruitt and Brother Bible. Thank you all so much for this conversation, because it's the frequency. And Ole, I was messaging you on Twitter because maybe we'll another time, or if you have time to stay, we can go through your thread, because it's the frequency that this happens that I think people are underestimating. And when we're talking about human life, we're talking about, these are people's, like, this one time is too many. And we're at the stage in this nation's development where we're not at the stage where we can have a proper expectation that the police should not be killing us. That should just be the expectation. We're so far removed from that, where in some cases they won't even give them a slap on the wrist for killing us. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back with more Like or Not. But thank you, Attorney Bible, again, Captain Pruitt, and Attorney Ole. Thank y'all so much for joining us this morning.
Brother Dixon, before we go to a break, I think, we've certainly been talking about this issue of police accountability, in New York, the state of Washington. But I'd also like to have our panelists, because Captain Pruitt brings insight into this George Floyd bill that's okay in Congress, and I have no idea what it is, what's good about it, what's bad about it, and I think that she can bring some incredible insight. And I certainly, if our panelists can hold on, that'd be great.
I was going to say, yeah, if you all have the time, I want to be respectful of your time, but if you need to go, we're going to take a quick break. But if you have the time, we can flesh this out a little bit further. We still have time. So let's take a quick break. Let's reset. Everybody get your coffee, get your tea, whatever you need to do. And when we come back, we'll handle the B side of this conversation, more like it or not, after this really quick break.
Red off. Shout out to everybody again. Oh, I was muted. Good morning again, everyone. We're going to get our patrons read off real fast. So here we go and get into some of this new music. New patrons, or new Twitch subscribers, should I say. Progressive J Log resubscribed and commented, "Thanks to at the Chicken Fried Dragon for my sub gift. This was delayed, I know. They've been subscribed for 3 months. The Emo Dragon resubscribed and commented, Ben, I'm a big fan. Love your work, brother. Thank you for the retweet on Twitter a while back, man. Not often someone you looks up to follows you. I hope Chauvin gets life, but part of me thinks he'll get 10 to 15. And they've been subscribed for 3 months. Mimosa Dragon gifted one subscription. We appreciate you. JN Lee 1981 gifted one subscription to Danielle LGBTQIA. Sammy Lynn and Con Dragon gifted one subscription to Frost Banana. We have the Chicken Fried Dragon who gifted one subscription to Trevor Panaki. Platinum Yeti cheered 100 bits, and Ali O'Shea also cheered 100 bits as well to y'all. Hey, make sure that if you want to, you need to, you need to join our Patreon, patreon.com/likeItOrNot, patreon.com/likeItOrNot. Yeah, you can get exclusive content, y'all, get access to all these patron parties. Speaking of which, patron party going down on Friday, so make sure that you are in the building. Go ahead and hit that Patreon, y'all. Patreon.com/likeItOrNot, patreon.com/likeItOrNot. And like I told y'all, here's some more new music. Let's get it. Let's go.
Right place to move.
And Anna Hart, thank you for your super chat. She says, Attorney Bible, what do you think of the coming Washington law about making a police accountability office within the governor's office? Thank you for all coming and speaking to us this morning. Anna will make sure that David shares your questions with the panel once he comes back. And on Twitch, the problem with the police union that is basically organized crime. It's not really a union for workers. And that's for Austin Couston. Thank you for that. We appreciate you. Shout out everyone. Make sure that you hit that like button, y'all. Hit that like button. Showster 100. Good morning. Good morning, Laura Estrada. Anna Hart, you're welcome, my sister. Infinite content, we got you. There's so far up there, man. Yeah, the break time and the panel got away from us. So, infinite content, we appreciate you. Thank you for your super chat, sir. We'll make sure we get them. Justice Jaconis, good morning, sir. All right, y'all, let's get back to the conversation. Brother Ben, back to you, sir.
DJ exclusive on the 1 and 2s. I've always wanted to say that since I was a little boy. Hey, man, thanks so much for keeping us going and keeping us because these conversations get real heavy. These conversations get really heavy, and they have a tendency to cause, as we fight for justice, these conversations have a tendency to cause trauma along the way. And so thank you for helping us work our way through these conversations, brother.
Hey, anytime, sir, anytime.
Absolutely. I want to bring everybody back on the screen. Let's keep it going. Brother Carl Mack, Captain Sonia Pruitt, Attorney Olorin, and Attorney Bible. Thank you all so much for giving us this much of your time. I'm always trying to be considerate of, but these conversations they really require a proper fleshing out, and they require a fleshing out to let them know. And when I say they, I mean the people with power, to let them know we know the game that they're playing. We are not ignorant of their devices. Brother Mac, it's in your hands, because I want this. I really appreciate you guys staying, because I want to further the conversation.
Well, look, Captain Pruitt, forget Captain. I've just elevated you to Chief. You're the Chief now. so Chief, I know that you wrote.
You're the only one.
Let it be known that I am your #1 fan. Okay, I'm your groupie, right? So Chief, I know that you wrote an op-ed piece about what's going on nationally in the Congress around the George Floyd bill. So if you can expound upon what you like or what you don't like about it, and later I want to come back to all of you, because we've been talking about the systemic issue of what's wrong with this. And so you can give us your thoughts of what would a more equitable system of accountability look like in law enforcement. But first, Chief, if you can just tell us about what's going on in Congress on a national level for police accountability. Again, your likes and dislikes.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm waiting for somebody to call me and offer me a chief's job, but I don't think that's going to happen because they're like, we're not going to let her be in charge.
They can't let a black woman get that much power in this country.
Not this one, right? Okay.
No.
So the George Floyd, they put his name on it. Justice and Policing Act is a source of great consternation and frustration for me. And the consternation and frustration is because I don't think it has had ample public and community buy-in. People don't really know what's in the bill. Who's going to sit down and read hundreds of pages of anything, right? I did. So I feel like people are being misled. I put my glasses on so I can see my notes. I feel like people are being misled in some ways. For instance, let's just talk about some of the things you've heard about, that they want to create a police registry for misconduct, report use of force and that sort of thing, right? But that's dependent on police departments actually reporting the information. So what would be the impetus for them to do that, right? Well, we're going to attach it to federal funding. But the truth about funding is $120 billion in funding comes for police departments, usually state and local, and only $5 billion of that $120 billion comes from the federal government. If you are a small police department, you probably are not getting very much federal funding. And most police departments in this country are small, 15, 20 people or less. So they may not be reporting their use of force. What is this bill going to do to change that? Nothing. One of the other sticking points for me is the part about banning chokeholds. And let me look at my notes because, again, I'm getting older and sometimes I can't remember everything I want to say. And having body-worn cameras and having cameras a mandatory part of your equipment in your police cars, right? But that's for federal officers. Nobody sees federal officers unless you're actually reading the document. It makes it sound like that's something that's going to be mandatory for all officers. Most of what's in the JPA, to me, will depend on police departments actually saying, okay, we're in on this. We have buy-in and we're gonna help the government out in collecting this information and doing these things.
Can you help me understand? Let's unpack that a little bit more, because I think I didn't even know that myself. And I think there's an assumption in there that there would be buy-in, but you're saying the mechanism that would initiate the buy-in, the threshold is so low that there's a lot of agencies that won't even meet the threshold.
Listen, we already collect use of force data in this country. The FBI, that's part of their responsibility. But police departments are underreporting that tremendously. You might have your major police departments doing the most reporting, but a lot of our sisters and brothers that are being killed by bum dunk Missouri officer. They only got like 50 people in their police department. We might not even ever hear about it. So it's a huge, I don't want to accuse our lawmakers of smoke and mirrors, but for me, it's insubstantial. It is not going to do what it is that the people are asking for. And the people don't know it because they're not part of the process. Heck, we can't even get Congress people to have a conversation with Black police groups except for Noble. I love Noble. I'm a member of Noble. But when do you stop just saying, okay, we got to have stronger police reform? That doesn't say anything. You need to be specific about what it is that you're looking for, and then you demand it, not sit at the table and cross your legs and say, well, yeah, we need strong police reform. That does nothing.
And Sister Olay, I don't know if you have insight into the George Floyd bill, but if so, I certainly like to hear your thoughts about it as well.
I do. I talked about it on BNC recently, actually. But Captain Pruitt is spitting. I just want to say that she said a lot of what I would come up here and say. And while she may not want to accuse them of, our legislature,
I'm with you.
I sure will.
Like it or not, we're going to accuse.
Yes, I sure will. Yeah. So no, that's basically the issue, right? First of all, So what the act does is they condition certain federal funding, a certain amount of federal funding on these states past doing these initiatives. Most of those initiatives, like Captain Pruitt referenced, is, banning chokeholds, which I want to say are already banned on a state level at most police departments in the country. And again, it goes back to my earlier point. If you pass a law, you make a reform. If it doesn't apply against the police, if it's not enforced, it does not matter. Same thing goes with the body cam footage. All of these things, these initiatives are already in place in one way or the next. And additionally, like I said, for me, police brutality comes down to how our policing is done, where police are, the amount of money we're putting into this, the occasion police have to interact with people. So what over-policing does in contributing to police violence. And the act does nothing to speak to any of that. As a matter of fact, like I said, there's no withholding of funding, no funding being allocated any other places besides the police departments. It's simply, hey, I know you already get all your money on a state and local level, but that little bit of money we give you, we'll still give it to you if you say, you won't do these things that you already said on the state level you won't do. The only real teeth real teeth in the act is qualified immunity, and that's exactly really the reason we're not going to see it become the law, I would say. But yeah, I want to echo Captain Pruitt's sentiments, just with more at their necks about it. But
Sister Olay, like it or not, she is now the chief.
Oh yeah, she's been promoted.
President, do you have any insight or into this national bill as well?
Yeah, I would concur that qualified immunity is at the heart of the issue for the George Floyd bill. A lot of what we'll have to do is focus on things locally in terms of pushing equity, equality, and authentic accountability in law enforcement agencies. The reality is that it's going to entail or require people power to force change. We have to promise that we won't hide the instances of injustice, that we'll be in a place where we make sure that they go public as much as we can in any way that we can, so that the system can't hide behind the perceptions of the badge. We need to show the actual authentic realities. It is absolutely true that police underreport use of force. We have videos of officers in Manuel Ellis's case where they've choked other people, and we've done the public disclosure requests for any report related to use of force linked to that, and they're not there. We'll be showing those videos this week. That's a reality that we have here, is that often officers choke, tase, beat, harm people, then talk individuals out of filing a complaint, bury it deep, and say it didn't happen.
Okay, and so Chief Pruitt, one of the things you talked about was this registry. Is it true or is it not that that law enforcement is being infiltrated by white supremacists? And is that part of the quote unquote registry where you look at the background of who's being recruited into law enforcement?
Sometimes I have to pray just a little bit before I start talking.
Well, little baby Jesus is in the room.
Baby Jesus.
Policing was formed on white supremacy.
That's why you the chief. Like it or not.
It's no doubt. I want to share with y'all something. I get a lot of hate mail from previous coworkers. I'm okay with it.
Wow.
But some of those previous coworkers, not the ones that are sending me hate mail, would tell me about conversations that they had with our peers, with our white peers, and the things that they would say about Black people and the people who they were supposed to be protecting and serving. So we know it's not like a secret. It's like the worst kept secret in the world that policing and the military is infiltrated, or I don't even know if that's a good word, full of white folks who are supremacists and nationalists. The question is, what are we doing about it? Nothing. Yeah. So I worked in Montgomery County, Maryland. And after the January 6th insurrection and riot and thuggery, I expected for all of the police chiefs and the sheriffs in the DMV to do an all-out investigation to find out who the hell in my department was down at the Capitol on January 6th, right? quiet as a mouse in the DMV. I started calling people, hey, you heard about any investigations in your organization? No, you nothing about no investigation. They don't want to know. Because when you know, you got to do something about it. Or at least people are going to say you need to do something about it. And they're not ready because it's part of policing culture. It's part of the culture. So how do you, pull the claws out? You're going to take skin and intros and everything when you start pulling white supremacy out of policing, but it has to be done.
Mr. President and Sister Olay, let me go to you because I saw hands go up, the pom so talk to us.
Soon as you said infiltrated, I was like, infiltrated. You mean started, lives, home too? Listen, I talk about this often. I feel like, racism in the criminal system, not just even policing, the entire criminal system, we tend to think of as this insidious thing that you need to parse through statistics, go read about, go talk to people. No. Go walk there. Go walk in the courtroom. It's there. It's plain as day. I used to think that when I was studying it in school, like, oh, I have to do this. I thought I would have to find something, carve it out. No, it's soon as you walk in the court, it's the way they're talking to your Black clients versus you. It's the way they're telling you, all the Black attorneys, to get out the front row because they think you're a defendant. It's the way I know if I represent a white client, I can almost turn off my ears for this. I don't even need the story because I know that it's going to be a different ball game. Like when I get out of there, they're going to act entirely differently. The only time I've ever had the prosecution credit my narrative, the narrative I present as a defense attorney, is when I have a white client. That's the only time all of a sudden they care. Every time I've ever represented 1,000 people, I never got up there and said they were guilty, ever. But when I have a white client and I say it, they call me up the next day, working with me, doing what the client's family wants to do. It's just a different game. I remember once I represented a white woman, and you could see the prosecutor next, you could see in their file what they have to show the judge. I see some pictures of some injuries. I'm like, "Ooh, child. Ooh, I don't know what's gonna happen." The prosecutor just closed the file. Just closed it and consented to release, and that's what happens. And the same arraignment shift, same judge, same prosecutor. I represented a Black guy with a blunt. They asked for, this was years ago, they asked for thousands of dollars worth of bail on him. Immediately following, I represented a white guy who's clearly had a bag full of drugs, and they were like, consent to his release. And I've just, and I've learned to expect that. I don't have a white client in jail. I don't have not a one.
And Mr. President, Mr. President, I know that you've had, I think it was a situation in Auburn, Washington. And if you could talk about again, and forgive me for the word infiltration, but it started like that. So if you can ring in on that.
Well, the situation that I think you're talking about in Auburn, because there's been a few, Auburn, Washington. I
used to live there.
Yes, involves an officer that killed 3 people in 9 years. And then has run over one of my clients, allegedly. Go ahead, Cynthia.
That's okay. Let the young man.
I've got my son in the background. That's 110 degrees, but the truth is, he's the reason why I do all of this. Because if something happens to him out here, I'm getting down and I'm not coming back. So you have to write about me in a different kind of way,
brother.
Is the truth. We won't be going to court.
Come on, Doc. They don't. Do they realize how much we love our kids?
No, that will literally just be it. Yeah. There won't be an eloquent conversation about that. There'll be oh my Lord. Right. Where was I? I'm sorry.
It's okay. We all there. We
stay right there.
We're gonna jump on the next plane. We got you. We got your back.
Because listen,
that's right. And I'll jump on a plane too. I sure will. But in Auburn,
they think they've seen an angry Black man.
Oh yeah, they think they've seen, and I'll be focused until they stop me. But the reality is, Auburn, Washington, 3 people killed in 9 years by the same police officer. He's finally charged with murder. He ran over one of my clients in apprehending them. He didn't die. He lived to tell the tale, though he has 2 broken legs. The reality he had tattoos on his body that said better to be judged by 12 than carried by 6, and has the mentality of a killer. And when he was finally charged with murder, first of all, the prosecutor asked for no bail, none on him, saying that, well, he only tends to do these kinds of things when he's working, and he's not working with his badge, though he's still getting paid. But you know who filled that courtroom? the entire Auburn Police Department, and they stared down the families of the victims and looked at them as if they had no right to be there. In the arraignment for Manuel Ellis, the officers looked at the family as if you have no right to be here and said, what are you doing? What are they doing here in terms of why are they there, to their own attorneys? But in Auburn, Washington, just like so many other towns, and Auburn's not a big town, you have these repeat killers, these repeat offenders that are consistently protected. I can't tell you how many officers I've dealt with where it's not their first time they've killed. Everybody in their department knows there's a problem, but instead of actually addressing it, instead of a chief saying, I'm going to try to fire you, even if it means that at some point you're able to come back and I have to pay you back pay, I'm just, instead of that, they just bury it deep and they act like anybody that says anything is crazy. And that's Auburn, Washington, and so many other places.
So Brother Dixon, I want to go to the like it or not situation, because as we're talking about this, it's easy for us to look at how white law enforcement officers act, but there's this brotherhood. So like it or not, I need to hear from you all about Black officers who we fought to get inside law enforcement so that they can bring a sensitivity to our community. But, is that culture corrupting them to now bring them on? Or is this your experience that no Black officers, they protect our interests, or do they fall in line with that code of silence, that thin blue line? So Chief, you were there. So
when you invited,
like it or not, Chief, talk to us.
It's just like Harriet Tubman. What she say? Basically, we're gonna have to leave some of y'all's asses here.
Come on.
That's the same thing we have in policing with Black police officers. Now, I can't prove this, but in my opinion, every Black officer and every brown, Hispanic, I don't know about Asian, but Hispanic and Black officers.
Well, we saw one of them at the George Floyd situation, so they in the group too. Like it or not.
You just making my nerves bad right now.
Do you speak on it?
There's just gonna be some people who you can't reach, and the reason why you can't reach them is because they don't even understand. It's just like the slave patrol. We had slaves patrolling in the slave patrol, and how did they sell that to the slave? They were like, "You're better than them. We got you. You're gonna get better food and clothing and housing, and you're gonna be comfortable." I see it the same way. It's some Black folks that become the police, and they just comfortable now. They don't want to, mess things up. I had put a question in the chat about training, and I'm following what the brothers, Dr. Bible. I'm sorry, brother Bible, Mr. Bible.
It's the name Bible. It's a powerful name.
It is powerful. I'm following what you're saying about that tattoo that says better to be judged by 12 than carried by 6. You learned that in training. So the indoctrination starts in training, and many Black officers fall for the blue Kool-Aid. That's what I call it. If you are strong and centered in your Blackness, like I am, I was listening to that stuff like, okay, well, when are we going to learn about how to treat people? I actually went to an academy where the older, it was a lot of older white officers who taught us. And so actually it's interesting. It seems like as the years went by and the people at the academy became younger, that's when we started hearing more of these little catchphrases and learning that the public is your enemy. So Black officers are feeling like they are part of a brotherhood. We like being part of a family, right? That's part of who we are. We like family and hanging out and being friends. And that's my brother, those are my people. But they're not seeing the damage that is being done. And some people are seeing the damage and ignoring it because, you know what? I got to feed my family. I don't want no trouble. I saw how when Sonia said something, they threatened her family. And so you find the ones who are, and there are so many who are out here. I mean, they are active officers who are doing the thing. They are saying what needs to be said. They're doing what needs to be done. Some of them are getting assaulted by their fellow officers. You know, their lives are in danger, but yet they persevere.
Sister Olay.
There are 36,000 officers in New York City and the NYPD, and a wealth of them are people of color, other people of color, marginalized people. I think, you know, when we say policing is systemically racist, we mean systemically. You know what I mean? You as an individual, you know, doesn't change what the system is, what they're teaching, what the foundation there is. And I think that is important when I say, you know, I always try to say violence is like violence in policing rather than police brutality, just because I want to be clear that violence is a part of it, right? This is how they're being trained. This is how the job goes. And I think there are exceptions to the rule, but I always try to explain this to people. Whenever I tell people, you know, being a Black police officer, being a Black prosecutor, these aren't the answers to it. They always, you know, they'll tell you about how they're like fighting against it. But that's my point. You have to fight against what your organization and what your job is and what it is to do. You have to. So clearly, what is the thing? You know what I mean? You have to fight it to do it. And as far as, you know, in real life, Black people go hard at everything it is that we know that, right? Whatever a Black person is committed to, invested in our ideology, we go hard. We work very hard. In the same vein, that's what you get across the aisle. You know, people be like, "Oh, you're excited as a Black prosecutor?" I'm like, no. Because I mean, that Black prosecutor is about to go as hard about, you know what I mean, their convictions and what they believe, you know, the opposite of what I feel. And that's what you see in court. I don't want you to think I walk into court and I see, you know, there's on the Black Lady sketch show, there's this sketch that goes, you know, Black Lady courtroom, and everybody in the court is a Black lady. And I'm like, that's not great. I don't want to walk into court and see.
But Sister Olay, I want a specific, and I know you don't have the data for it, but what my question is, in the majority of cases that you have personally dealt with, when you come across law enforcement officers of color, are they drinking the blue Kool-Aid, as the chief said?
Absolutely. They absolutely are. They like I said, like you see this Captain Pruitt, there are going to be exceptions. There are going to be people that, you know, see it and resist. But I think you have to remember, as a Black person, when you exist in like white spaces or where there is like systemic or foundational racism, you always have an opportunity. There's an opportunity at some point, whether it's, you know, implied or explicit, to choose to go against, you know, the community, to make a decision that I could be the token and this could be better for me. I went to a law school as a prosecutor, middle law school. I interned at a DA's office for my 2L summer. And I sat there and I heard all of the things that I thought, you know what I mean, I knew about the system. I heard it. They were having lectures every Thursday, you know, reciting this, regurgitating it. And there are Black people sitting next to me like, I want to be a DA, I want to be do this. You know, there are Black police there or whatever. And I'm like, you hearing this? Are you hearing it?
Come on.
People make a decision after a while, like, you know what? I can look out for me. I will be fine. Me is okay. I have somehow classed or educated my way out of this problem. You know what I mean? I'm a part of the community of this, and they've accepted me, so it's fine for me, and forget the rest. And I think the same way you see that in policing.
Now, Mr. President, being in the state of Washington ain't but like 25 Black folk up there. and being
and almost all of them are charged with crimes.
Right.
Oh, wow.
And being up there, you know, back to Brother Dixon's point when we first started this, and Chief Pruitt talked about being a chief. We actually had a Black female chief as the chief of police up there. So what has been your personal experience with law officers and law administrators of color when it comes to the blue Kool-Aid, or not drinking the blue Kool-Aid, and protecting our community?
Okay, I'm going to start with this. Manuel Ellis's mother is a high school counselor. There was a young African-American man in her that was her TA, teacher's assistant. And on his last day of school, he said that someday he wanted to wear a tie for his job. So she went and took him to get ties, series of ties, and told him that you can do anything and you can be anything. That young man became a police officer. And as Manuel Ellis was being choked, tased, had a spit hogtied and had a spit mask over his head, that same young man was standing right there and is on administrative leave and hasn't had the courage to say a word about what was done to his high school counselor's child. The same person that actually bought him ties and told him he was special He hasn't for a second come out and said anything. That is the blue wall of silence absolutely personified. I've seen him on Facebook, on vacation, on travel, on doing everything else, except for standing up for the person that stood up for him and told him he could be special. He was there. He participated in silence and in covering up. And that's the reality. And in terms of the institutional inequities with the Seattle police chief, the reality is nobody was listening to her anyway. And the reality is that she had to do a few things in order to get to that spot. And some of those things I'm uncomfortable with, frankly. Some of those things I'm uncomfortable with because on a lot of levels, it impacted overall what we could do in Seattle is a reality. We have African-American police officers in Seattle that beat Black women on the force during their case. One specific video that I can remember where he punched a Black woman in the face in the back of his patrol car while she was handcuffed, and then he acted like somehow he got kicked in the jaw, and on the video he's going, oh my goodness. And this has been a repeat over and over and over and over again offender. Those that say and do anything in law enforcement in Seattle, in Tacoma, in Washington State, in California, down the line that are African American risk responses that are truly remarkable. I have a friend who was a police officer down in LA, and he didn't shoot a Black kid that had a gun. And he ended up arresting the kid. And you know what they told him? And he told me the story in law school in tears. They told him, next time you will shoot that kid, and you have to remember whose side you're on. And then after that, 2 weeks later in LA, he's taking on gunfire and he's calling for backup. He's calling for help, and nobody comes to his aid. And when he makes it back to where he needs to be, they smirk at him and they tell him, remember whose side you're on.
And Chief Pruitt, I think between you and Sister Olay, I'm sure you know this case of the sister. I think she was in Ohio, and there was a white officer performing misconduct on somebody, and she stopped him. And then as a result, they fired. Tell us the story, if you will.
That's Carrie Horn. I think that's Buffalo.
Buffalo, okay.
They have a law named after her now, by the way, but she had to fight 15 years to clear her name and to get her pension. Her fellow officer was choking a handcuffed man and beating him, and she intervened and pulled him off her, and then she got smacked as a result, of course. So she got injured, and for all of her efforts, she was ostracized, discriminated against, retaliated against, and eventually forced out of the police force. But she never stopped fighting. And so now there is a law called Carriel's Law named after her. It's a duty to intervene law. But I want to jump back to the police chief in Washington State, if I may.
Seattle.
In Seattle. Carmen Best. Now, I don't usually call people's names. Y'all, I be trying to be a little bit, like
it or not, you call it.
Okay. But Chief Best, one of the things I peeped about her is when we were in town in Seattle, remember this, Carl, and we were having a conference there, the National Black Police Association, and she was honored at our conference, but she was not a member of the association, even though there is a chapter in Seattle. I'm like, she's not going to join the association? That was the first thing. The second thing is when she decided to get, she was feeling indignation about defund the police. I don't like that word either, but I know what it means. She knows what it means too. And she was feeling indignation, and she was letting the troops know, I got your back. And then she quit because I cannot take this. I was like, come on, sister, really? Really? Instead of you standing in it and telling people what defund actually means, and that we've been defunding damn police departments since time untold. Instead of doing that, I can't take this anymore and I'm leaving. That's how I read it. And now she's on MSNBC too, or CNN.
Well, I want
what have you done? But what did she do to help our cause as Black people to keep people from dying?
Yeah. And I want to say this, family, I pray God that Black law enforcement officers watch this, because this is a perspective that we have about you, because we've seen so many cases. So like it or not, this is the conversation. And I like the fact that we're very real about it. And Brother Dixon, you've set up a format for us to talk about real issues, real time, like it or not. So I'm just so honored to have this discussion with the three of you about this, because you're bringing such insight into it. And I'm just so honored by it. But as we come to a close, this situation, we've talked about the systemic issues. So if there was if you had a blank slate and you could paint your masterpiece about police accountability, what would it look like, Sister Olay?
I was gonna say something else, but
please do your thing.
I was gonna say, just as my general response to how police have responded to calls for reform and changing the way they deal with people is this. Before I became a public defender, they had us trained for months, and there was a panel of previously incarcerated people that spoke to us about all the things they hated about their public defenders and the problems they have with public defenders. There's no secret, there's a negative perception around. And when I heard that, I didn't hear, oh my God, how dare, they say these things about me and my job. I was like, you know what? Let me listen to them and these are the people that I want to serve. I got into this job because I believe that the only Black person in the court shouldn't be the defendant. Black people deserve to be represented and cared for and fought for by people that look like them and are going to humanize them. So I listened, right? I listened, and I'm good friends with one of them to this day, Barry. And he told me, what I needed to do and how I listened to my clients and all these things. And that's what informs my job. So in the same way, if police were in the business of protecting and serving the community, they would want to hear the community, to incorporate the community's demands and the community's complaints. But instead, like Brother Bible told us, what we're hearing is, remember what side you're on. And I think that is important. I think that is what fundamentally underlies the entire discussion on, police, whether they be Black, white, Hispanic, whatever that they are. They view it as a side. They don't see themselves as a general consensus as serving the community, because they would hear the community. They wouldn't be taking arms against the community. So that's all I had to contribute on that.
Thank you.
Whew, y'all.
Ben, let me just push one other thing into it. One of the things that I find just so extraordinary, and I think one of you brought it up, is that when these civil cases are brought against these officers, it's not the police department or the police union that has to pay out these exorbitant lawsuits. It's the city, which now means that our taxpaying dollars are going to it. What's your thought about, instead of the city being culpable as a way of bringing about police accountability, could you tell us what it would be like, what you think it would be like if those lawsuits had to be settled by police union pension funds instead?
That sounds like a dream.
No, because I'll tell you this. If I were a law enforcement officer and I know that this particular guy is a knucklehead, and him being a knucklehead is going to reduce my pension, believe me, he would have to be taken behind the woodshed and handled, because we're not going to sit there and allow that to happen. But
listen, there is nothing greater than peer pressure. I believe that. I believe that when officers are called out by other officers, that has the greatest effect, because now they know, oh shit, I can't do this. Excuse me for cursing. I'm sorry. I can't do this around this person. Maybe they'll go do it around somebody else, but they know somebody's watching. That was who I was. When I showed up, everybody was like, okay, here she comes. But I like that idea. I like the idea that, because right now police unions are using the money of officers to do stuff like protect bad officers, right?
Yeah.
I hate using that word bad too, but you know what I mean. They're using that money to protect officers who are involved in misconduct. So why not? Why not have that? They got millions of dollars. Why not?
Mr. President?
Absolutely. I would say this. The reality is that Black folks are in a domestic violence relationship with law enforcement. We get beat down, we get shot, and then we're told that it's our fault. And if we acted differently, it wouldn't happen to us. Just stay silent. The reality is, study after study has pointed out that domestic violence is actually ended or lessened when the community knows all about you, your community, your neighbors. In a situation where other police officers absolutely know what's been done and it's impacting them directly, we have a greater opportunity for authentic change. So if the pension fund is impacted, if your fellow officer is impacted in terms of their own employment, then there's a greater chance that perhaps that peer pressure would actually work in terms of changing something or anything. I would like to hold all folks accountable. Cities need to be held accountable still too. Unions should be held accountable. Officers that stood by and watched should be held accountable as well. It's interesting because the other day I actually heard an ad for insurance for individual police officers, just to protect against the possibility that they could be sued. So maybe that sort of thing is actually coming. But the reality is that we need something, and we need to test it out, change it, see what actually applies and what works. And if it doesn't work, then we need to try again and keep trying. And once they revamp and change and switch and end up in the place where they can be racist in a different sort of way, we have to be in a space where we revamp, change, and are prepared to deal with it.
Wow.
Can I say something about what you said, Mr. Bible, about the domestic violence relationship? Because you made me think of something. In domestic violence relationships, when does the perpetrator become most dangerous? When that person who they are abusing decides to leave that situation, right?
Right.
So after the death of George Floyd, when all of America and all of the world rose up and was like, wait a minute, now you done gone too far. Guess what happened? We had what looked like an increase in police encounters. Now, maybe it could be that more people had their cell phones out. I don't know. But it just seems like if you know as a police officer that people are pissed off about what happened to George Floyd, wouldn't you be on your P's and Q's? Instead, there were some officers who was like, oh no, I'm gonna keep doing what I do. And more people died as a result.
Because they don't mind people being pissed off. They don't mind. They know the world is watching. The world has been watching. They see it on video. They're often being video recorded. I go to the protests. I go to the protests as a person that's attending them and as a legal observer watching the police. They literally go packed in military gear. They line the things and they initiate violence and ways to arrest people. They will literally you'll be standing in a protest, nothing will be happening, and they'll run into the crowd, put somebody so that there's, hysteria, start following, punching people, intentionally pushing them onto the sidewalk, then, arresting them for it, barricading it so that people can only go to a certain place, and then preventing them from being able to leave. And then the curfews that the mayor imposed, like I said, they all play a part in how this is able to continue. And then they barricade the people so they can't leave and then lock them all up after, it's ridiculous. So no, you would think so, but that's for people, with a conscience, with shame about them, not some people that have been told, hey, this awful thing y'all stay doing, we're not going to do nothing about it. You know what I mean? They don't care so much about our outrage because they've made it clear to us, they don't work for us. They don't care how we feel about it. That's not their concern. Oftentimes we watch these videos and people's families there, they're witnesses, there's a friend, there's someone there. How often there are so many, like I said, I post daily, somebody has been killed by the police that didn't get the national attention. Like Tyrese West was in his yard, you know what I mean? His so many of them, their grandmother, their parents, their family members. Casey Goodson in Columbus, Ohio, happened shortly after George Floyd. He was entering his home. His nieces and his Grammy saw it. The sandwiches he was holding in his hand to take to them on the ground. They killed him right in the doorway of his own home. So they don't care, you know, the P's and Q's. They don't care at all. Because they're not in it for how we feel about it.
Yeah. You know, I'll say this in my closing remarks, Brother Benjamin. First, again, thank you so much for this platform that you've put together. And Sister Olay, I'm so proud of the work that you've done. I'm proud, Chief Pruitt, Mr. President, and the thing I'll speak specifically about Chief Pruitt and Brother Bible, just to let you all understand, it's not like these folks had a tremendous amount of time to prepare for this. I called Chief Pruitt late last night to say, Chief, can you come on? And you're hearing, the reason you can hear her speak so matter of fact about this is because this is what she lives. This is what she's seen. I called Brother President this morning about 30 minutes before this show came on. So there's no preparation. These people are talking about their real life experience of what we see in law enforcement, and you're getting it from the inside. So Brother Dixon and to the panelists, I'm just so proud and honored, you know, to know all of you and to be a part of this. And thank you so much for being a part of giving us, our community, this very detailed inside look from a prosecutor lawyer standpoint, from inside law enforcement. Thank you all so much.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
I've been listening, and you all have we got to know whose side we on. Just like they're telling them to know whose side they are on, we better know whose side we are on. And this is what I mean. We got to understand from the perspective who we really are in this nation, in the United States, in the greatest empire in the history of the world. We are the descendants of enslaved people who built this nation. Mm. We are not the descendants of, now, no matter how much our blood may have been mixed together because of them raping our Black women, we're not the spiritual or descendants of the founding fathers. We're the people who survived them. Hmm. And I'm listening to y'all this morning. I'm like, yo, if we as a people don't understand that fundamental fact that we can't play around with America, because America's not playing around with us.
Like it or not.
They playing for keeps. Y'all see what these Republicans are doing with voting rights across this country. And the fact that after George Floyd was killed, these cops start killing more people. That's because we are in a system that was built on our backs. We can't pretend as though we're in a system that was built for our pleasure. Mm-hmm. So we got to know what side we're on. Mm-hmm. Thank y'all so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
I enjoyed you all. Thank you so much.
Our pleasure. We went deep, Brother Mac. Thank you for putting that together for us. And DJ Exclusive, I saw you in the background, man. You were taking in every word, man.
Yeah. Oh yeah, most definitely. It was an experience. I just hope that this show gets replayed several times, because this was definitely an awesome ass episode. And it was good to get the different perspectives, especially from Captain Pruitt's side. Chief Pruitt's side, because it needed to be said. And it's just so many great things came from that panel. It absolutely amazing, y'all. Thank y'all. Kudos to y'all. I appreciate y'all.
I got to tell you, folks, when Brother Dixon told me yesterday that Sister Olay was going to be on and what she was going to talk about, you know, what I love is the flexibility of this entire team to bring real world issues that are facing us on a dime. You know, I tell him, you know, look, man, here's Chief Pruitt, here's Attorney Bible. I think they can add to this, because trust and believe what they added. I couldn't bring those perspectives. And the same with David, you know, to be able to send you all what an incredible team and an incredible show that you put together, Brother Dixon. And I like it because it's down home, and we're not talking above anybody's head. We're just telling it like it is. Like
Absolutely.
It or not.
Yeah. Well, folks, it's been a real one. DJ Exclusive, it's your world now, man.
Yes, sir.
Thank y'all so much. I'm gonna hang out a little while and with you, Brother Mac. Thank you so much, man, for hanging out.
Brother Mac. Thank you, sir.
And actually, no, I think I'm gonna retire too. DJ Exclusive, it is your world for real. I'm out of here.
I got you.
All right.
I'll see y'all in the morning. All right. Love y'all.
All right. Take care.
All right, thank y'all again so much for tuning in and joining us, man. What an awesome show today. Make sure that you rewatch and make sure that you share with a friend. Make sure that we get everybody in to do the conversation. Get everybody into the conversation. Get everybody involved. Share the content, y'all. Let's get it out there. Like it or not. Let's go. And make sure that y'all hit that like button on your way out. Make sure you hit that like button on your way out, y'all. And if you have not already, if you want to become a Patreon, you can. If you want to become a patron member of Like It or Not, you can too. Patreon.com/Like It or Not. Patreon.com/Like It or Not, y'all. And hey, make sure that y'all stay tuned. I promise. This week sometime, I will have that playlist uploaded somewhere. So just look out, y'all. Like It or Not, your boy DJ Exclusive. Let's go. So, I appreciate that. Lou Kang, what's going on, brother? Mark from Australia, what's going on, sir? Courtney, thank you. Take a blow, have another one. Take it slow, can you save me some? On the floor, end up when we're done. Yeah, it's a lot for everyone. Find me a galaxy away from my hometown. I'm way up on the coke and rum. You stay up, hoping I'll come home. Don't wait up, cause I'm way too gone. Don't wait up. I'm way up on the coke and rum. You stay up, hoping I'll come home. Don't wait up, cause I'm way too gone. Don't wait up. Sometimes and then you don't. You thought I would stay, well then I won't. Patricia, good morning. Mama, good morning. Mama and Daddy, love y'all. Brother Goku, Six Dragon Daddy, what's going on, y'all? Good morning. Again, y'all, make sure that you hit that like button on the way out, and make sure that y'all share this show, man. Let's get the conversation out there. Let's expand it. Let's get everybody involved in it, man. Esther, good morning. Matt, good morning to y'all. Y'all make sure that y'all enjoy y'all day. Have a great one, y'all. Let's get it. I can't help what I'm feeling. You think we're okay, baby, you're dreaming. You brought this on us and you don't know. Rain, I appreciate you making me bless and stuff. You know, stop. You don't know how much it hurts. You can't hold on. It's slipping through your hands, and I won't try to understand. It's all gone under your command, under your command. You want me right there and then you don't.
years since you broke my heart and tore me apart. Oh, yeah. I've been working on myself, trying to move on, looking up at someone else, trying to forget.
All right, y'all, this is going to be the last song of the day, but don't worry, we got more coming up tomorrow morning, so make sure you stay tuned. Hump Day is tomorrow, y'all. It's already Tuesday. We're getting through this week, man. Hey, love y'all. I really mean it. Make sure that you stay tuned. You keep it locked. You follow, subscribe, all that good stuff, man. Love y'all. Really mean it, man. Appreciate y'all. And thank y'all for checking in on me so much. I greatly appreciate it. Again, we will see you tomorrow. Deuces. More like it or not, make sure that you catch Georgia Fort with On the Clock with Georgia Fort in the morning at 8 a.m. We'll see y'all then. Deuces.
I wanna try again. You're not listening. No, you keep saying you'll change, but we both know people don't change it. It's time to let me go. Why won't you leave me alone? I deleted all your messages, 'cause it only reminds me of the past. But you're still drunk texting me when you're lonely. I don't